officer-involved shootings during that same time period. In the latter category, all of those people had guns. They were all wanted homicide suspects, some of them for multiple homicides. But those aren't the most important facts. The most important fact is none of us in this community, none of the people standing here, wants these outcomes. We don't want people shot in any way in our city. This year we've recovered 556 guns in our city. That's 13 guns a week, almost 2 a day. That's a form of prevention. We'll never know exactly how many of those guns being recovered have stopped another crime. Every week we have examples of our officers safely taking violent and armed people into custody with little or no use of force. This year alone, we've arrested 329 people who are either ineligible or didn't have a permit. In fact, 80% of those folks were ineligible for previous convictions that forbid them by state law for having a firearm. That's more than 1 a day. Those are the stories you don't hear about. Good decisions by our officers, and to be completely clear and fair, good decisions by those people being arrested are contributing to many of those successes. In 2022, at the end of November, I was brought in as the new chief of police. That year, we had 193 people shot by non-fatal gunshot wounds in our city. Our officers, our department, and our partnerships were able to reduce those numbers down to 122 in 2023. That's a 37% drop. This year, year to date, we're at 95. Now let's be clear, those numbers are still way too high, but those are improvements. What we're doing is working. Our homicide rate will always be too high until we get it to 0. But those numbers are also trending down, although clearly not in the areas we would like to see, even with the latest spike. But again, back to the fact, none of us, even with the improvement, are happy with these outcomes. We don't want people being shot in our city. Most of our weapons offenders, someone in their lives knew they had access to a gun or had a gun. That gives us a chance to intercede. That gives us a chance to interrupt that cycle before any of these crimes happen. That's where we have to really start showing up in a better way. And that's what we're working towards. People can turn in their guns and surrender those firearms before something happens. There are people standing up here right now that have literally brought me bags of guns before. No questions asked. Let's get those guns off the street. If you see something, we want you to say something. And as the mayor has said, we have the power to do something before a tragedy occurs. And again, it doesn't need to be a police solution. There isn't a person up here that wouldn't help make that connection. Everyone behind me and many more people that aren't here today stand ready to broker whatever trust divide is preventing people from calling out the behavior in advance, so we are not responding to crimes. We are not trying to apprehend offenders. We're preventing crimes, and we're removing offenders. I don't stand here today, although some of this news is bad, and obviously the trends since September 15th are extremely concerning, with a negative mindset. I stand here inspired by the people that stand behind me, as well as the many, many more people that are out there with great optimism. This city and the people in it care, and we have the ability to do better. We can be better, and we will be better. So again, if you take one thing away from this, the most important fact is no one in this city wants another shooting of any kind. I'm going to turn it over to the mayor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody for being here, certainly the men and women of our police department. Chief, thank you for your leadership of our police department. Certainly our Office of Neighborhood Safety, Director Brooke Blakey, thank you for your leadership. And as the chief said, we know in St. Paul that public safety has to be a big mission. We know in St. Paul, you know, we've heard all of our lives people say our police officers can't do it by themselves. And then the conversation ends up trailing off as we leave police officers to do it by themselves. That's not the case in St. Paul. It's a blessing to be able to stand here alongside not only the men and women who serve our city so capably in uniform, but by the men and women who serve as partners, who serve as collaborators, who serve as teammates in the mission, in the grand mission that belongs to the whole community of keeping our city safe. The chief said it really well. If you see something, say something. And if you say something, we have the team that's capable of doing something. We've been doing something. And Chief, with your leadership, Brooke, with your leadership, or this whole big team around this circle right here, we've seen, as the chief just described, significant reduction in shots fired in our city, significant reductions in people injured by gunfire in our city. We've seen just this year, as we created the non-fatal shootings unit in the police department, we've seen our St. Paul Police Department double their percentages of case clearance rates for non-fatal shootings. That work is important, and one of the things that you've all heard me say before is no one is better at tracking down, apprehending, arresting, and pressing charges on a suspect after shots have been fired. One of my favorite things about our police chief is he always says, that's not good enough. It's not good enough for us to take decisive action after shots have been fired. Our goal is always to prevent shots from being fired, to get those guns off the streets like the chief just described, to get help to people ahead of time. And we have a significant amount of help, whether it's through the police department, whether it's through some of our optimal response mechanisms that we've put in place through our fire department, through our Office of Neighborhood Safety, whether it's through some of the gun diversion work that our city attorney's office has led. We have been in an all-in posture around gun violence in St. Paul for some time, and it's working. As the chief said, we're very concerned about the outlier experiences that we've experienced over the last couple of weeks. And we know that the way to address those, the way to keep the progress going that we've been making in St. Paul over the past few years is to put our heads down and to continue to push forward in partnership with community as we have. One of the powerful things, one of the conversations the chief and I have had over the past couple of years is the fact that if you know something, if something is predictable, then that means it can be changed. That's part of the work that Brooke leads, to say we know that when people are a victim of gun violence or survivor of gun violence, their likelihood to be to be involved in gun violence in the future goes up infinitely at that point in time. That's one of the reasons why Brooke and her team are at the hospital after a shooting or after a critical incident to engage with families and to understand what they need so that we can prevent those retribution type of shootings. That's one of the keys to that, those numbers that the chief just described. To be clear, though, we can't do that without our community's help. When we talk about the case clearance rates that we have for homicides in St. Paul being almost double the national average, that's because our officers are fantastic, and it's also because our community members make sure that our officers have the information that they need to be able to do their job. When we think about people who have shot guns in this community, there is somebody. There's a spouse, there's a friend, there's a cousin, there's a girlfriend, there's a mother, a father, a grandparent, somebody who knew that that person had a gun and shouldn't have had a gun.
Say it again, Mayor.
And I know that some of those folks at times can be afraid to call 911. But let me tell you, the best thing that you can do for that person, the best thing you can do to keep that person from doing harm to themselves, from doing harm to someone else, from doing harm to your family, is to make sure that we have the information that we need for our big team to be able to engage and intercede. Our police non-emergency number is 651-291-1111. Our police non-emergency number is 651-291-1111. Mom, grandma, spouse, friend, coworker, I am asking you, when you see something, to say something, to take action. You can call 651-291-1111 and anonymously file a tip that can help us make sure that your loved one gets the support that they need, the intervention that they need ahead of time, so they cannot be in the type of critical situation that the chief just described. I appreciate all the partners here, and I'll get out of the way. I want to introduce our director of our Office of Neighborhood Safety, Brooke Blakey, briefly as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. And thank you for the community members. And just like the mayor said, 291-1111 is the number. And so when you hear our chief say we can't arrest our way out of that, that's what the Office of Neighborhood Safety is for. It's to collaborate with the community members that are here to make sure that we are holistically providing wraparound services to those families and to those individuals. We work collectively with our Project Peace as well as Operation Aspire to really focus on that. We have officers and life coaches that have now done 30+ custom notifications through the GVI model, in which we intervene because we know what's happening. We offer supports, but we also let them know that there's accountability if they're not willing to engage in those supports. So as the mayor often says, St. Paul is not a place to have gun violence happen, because we will find you, but we will also support you, and we will hold you accountable to the things that need to happen. The Office of Neighborhood Safety is excited to continue to work with our community members. We have several here, so I'll step aside and let them talk about the work and how they engage with us here in the city. So I'll turn it over to Tyrone Terrell.
Thank you, Brooke. Tyrone Terrell, President of the African American Leadership Council. I want to piggyback on what the mayor said. Too many times in our community, and I'm speaking as it relates to the homicides, the assaults in the black community, too many times somebody does know. Somebody always knows. I had a young man last night, 18 years old, told me all he dreamed about the last 6 weeks is being killed. That's all he dreamed about. And so when Dr. Morgan said to him, "What's your vision?" He said, "My vision is I'm going to get killed." And so we have a thing what we call the 60-second rule. Can you take 15 seconds as a kid or young man, whoever, before you pick up that gun, that knife, and think about, once you pull that trigger, it's too late. So if you know somebody's got a gun, thinking about killing somebody, as the mayor said, call that number. Call that number and get help. Call any of us up here and get that help. And to the black men in my community, my good buddy Spike Moss said just 5 years ago, if men in our community stand up, little boys will sit down. So the men in our community have to stand up, take their rightful place for our young men and our young women. Otherwise, this madness will continue. So we need to stand up and do what's right by our community. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Standing as a representative of the NAACP State Conference, I just want to speak to the issue and just the things that have been said up until now. Today, we gathered to address the urgent issue of gun violence and its impact on our communities, particularly the tragic reality of black-on-black crime. This is not just a statistic, it represents lives lost, families shattered, and communities in distress. And we must confront the systemic factors that contribute to this violence, including poverty, lack of access, education, and the different things that affect us systemically. We're living in a community in time now where we're experiencing a lot of trauma. Many families are being affected, and being a pastor in the church, I often get approached with the very fact of the trauma of families, some families that are affected, having buried so many people this year due to gun violence in my own church, and having to lay them to rest to try to comfort the families afterward, and the effect that it's having on the community. It's time for us as an organization and people, and I just want to say the NAACP and the mayor, we have been working closely in an agreement that's been over 24 years, where we help and affect the community, where we can change the way community and we as a people can work together to make our communities more safe, our homes more safe, to make sure our children are safe, to make sure that we can go, that our kids can go to school, work, have ambitions, not to dream that they're going to die, not to see their life past 18, past 25, to be able to look and have a hope for a future, a progress. You know, creating leaders for tomorrow that will one day help lead and guide this city in the direction that we're trying to head. I want to say we made good progress. We meet with Chief every other month through the agreement to try to help, and we've seen the changes. St. Paul is doing better. I think we're one of the leading cities that are working together, community, law enforcement, to try to help make our communities better. Nobody wants to see anybody's family hurt or traumatized. Nobody wants to see our young people lose their lives at an early age without achieving the dreams that they desire. Seeing mothers, grandmothers, aunties, uncles, brothers, sisters, and the tragic when one of their loved ones are killed, never to be seen again, and when they have to lay them to rest. And doing these eulogies, it has truly affected many. Many are dealing with trauma in their lives. And I want to end with this last statement, me being a preacher, and I'm a religious man. And it's a particular scripture that I want to quote today before I leave here. And it's in 2 Chronicles 7:14. And it said, if my people, which are called by my name, would humble themselves, seek my face, pray, and turn from their wicked ways, he said, then will I hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sins, and I will heal the land. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pastor Melvin Miller, Senior Pastor of Progressive Baptist Church and the President of the St. Paul Black Interdenominational Minister Alliance. And I my echo the sentiments that have been talked about by our mayor and by the Chief of Police and these distinguished other guests, the President of the NAACP and, of course, Mr. Tyrone Terrell. I want to say, if anything can be added, is that there is hope. There really is hope, and I think so often, as Brother Tyrone said, it's that many young people are hopeless given their circumstances and situations, but there's hope. There's hope, and it's our desire that young people would be in STEM camps and going on college tours and planning for the future, and it is our ambition through this coalition to make those hopes accessible to young people. And that's really, the reality is that there's hope. I think the mythology is that there is no hope. And we want to dispel the myth in our community that there are opportunities and there are doors that we want to open for you through your school counselors. There's so many people that are on your side, young people, if you just believe it and you open your hearts and minds to that. I want to say, just echo what has been said, that if you find a young person that is stressed and is challenged and is about to make a bad choice, please reach out. So many lives are impacted by the choices that our young people are making, the lives that are being taken too soon. And we're in the throes of putting together a summit in the next couple of weeks, members of this coalition, to pull together our community members and family members to say, what can we do and how can we do it most effectively? Because we will change the trajectory of our community. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Mickey Frost. I'm the founder of the 8 to 18 Truth Center. We work in close partnership with St. Paul PD and the rest of the partners here in the community to ensure that the community knows that they have somebody that represents them in times of need. We need to stop pointing fingers this way and start turning those fingers back around this way and start figuring out those ways that we can work together instead of this divide that the police department and the community has in critical times like this. So our job as community leaders are to come and let the community know that we will work on your behalf to make sure that the police department do what they are supposed to do, and the community is here to work alongside them to make sure that there is full transparency within anything that takes place in this city. That's what we need to do and continue to do, is to work together and not against each other, because we all know as community leaders that the police have a very hard job. And the job that they do takes time. It takes sometimes it's some of the most critical issues that they have to go through in this community. And when they see these things, it's very hard on them and their families. Just like it's hard on some of us and our families, because we live these lives and we're going through those things. So the last thing that we need is to be divided during these critical times. So us and these other leaders here, we want the communities to know that we come and we represent the communities and working side by side with the police department to make sure that everything is transparent and out in the open, so that everybody can know what's going on at all times and make these changes needed to make sure that our communities can stay safe. Thank you.
My name's Maria Meyer, and I come to you today with a message from St. Paul Intervention Project. We're a community-based program that serves victims of domestic abuse and their children. Domestic abuse is an epidemic in our nation, In Minnesota last year, we lost at least 40 of our neighbors to domestic violence, and more than half of those murders were with a gun. Firearms and domestic violence intersect, and the most dangerous time for a victim is when they try to leave. At that moment, a victim of domestic violence is 75% more likely to be murdered. So I come to you today to let you know there are resources in St. Paul. At St. Paul Intervention Project, we provide services at the acute intervention time, but we also provide ongoing transitional services and post-care services. We want to set people up for success. If a victim calls St. Paul Intervention Project, you will be treated with kindness, you will be believed, and you will be treated with respect. If you know someone, or if you are someone who is being abused, call and get the help that you deserve. And we can really put a stop to this domestic violence epidemic. St. Paul Intervention phone number is 651-645-2824. (651-645-2824).
Greetings. I am Pastor Joe Webb IV, and I'm a friend and brother of these great people up here. What Tyrone Terrell just said just really touched me, because that's a consistent speech you hear with the young people nowadays. So I don't want to be long, but if I can just be precise with the young people, that call, you're not a snitch, you're a hero, you're a community leader. When that stuff happens, suspend and forfeit the way of thinking that you are a snitch or you're telling on somebody. You're a leader, you're strong, you're a community leader, you're stepping up, and that's the message I want to give to all young people and anybody that's in this affliction with this violence. You're not a snitch, you're a hero.
Thank you, Pastor, for that, and I think that's true. Sadly, we've all been in too many situations where we've gotten a chance to talk to family members and friends who have looked and said, oh, I wish I would have gotten help. I wish I would have said something to somebody. I wish I would have done something. This is a big team that has done an enormous job, nation-leading work to combat domestic violence in our community, to help reduce violence among young people in our community, to help reduce violence among groups in our community. Our goal is to ensure that every single person in this community can stay alive, can stay safe, and can stay out of jail. And to the extent that we have the opportunity to work together in support of an individual ahead of time, upstream, ahead of some critical incident, we can be very good at that. And so that's our request to all of our community members. And I should also say, in Minnesota, we have a still relatively new red flag law that allows us to say if we have a loved one who we know should not have a firearm right now for one reason or the other, that allows us the opportunity to get help for that person as well. There are many tools at our disposal as a police department, at our disposal as a city. But there are far many more tools at our disposal to prevent crime and violence from happening in the first place, in partnership, in deep partnership, not just with the community leaders that we have in this room with us right now, but in partnership with the community members who are passionate on every block about the well-being of a neighborhood, or about the well-being of their family. We're asking you to join that team and be a part of that team with us. Thank you all very much. Is there any questions?
Very quickly, I just want to, there's an announcement that the folks here would like to make, so I'm just going to allow that to happen right now. I want to make sure they get the mic.
Coming up here in the near future, we're going to be announcing a summit between NAACP, African American Leadership, and the Ministers Alliance. These are the leaders of these organizations, and we want to bring the community, law enforcement, government officials together with community. We want to announce that you, please, when we bring the dates and the announcements, we want to hear from you, the community. We want to bring us together. We need to talk so that we can figure out ways that we can better serve our communities, our partners, our teams, our neighborhoods. We want to reduce violence in our communities. We want to reduce the likelihood of our young people being shot down in the streets. I know an individual, a young man, went up to her car in her driveway at gunpoint and demanded she get out of her car. But her husband came, and I said, it was just a miracle that he didn't shoot you. But he said, this is not happening. And after he stood there in faith, the individual, his buddy, said, man, let's just go, because he's not moving. And they left, and she was able to maintain her car and her life. We have to be vigilant, bold. And so we want to hear from the community. We want you to come out. We will be announcing, I believe we talked about maybe the first week or the second weekend in December. We will let the information get out. We'll make it publicized and let you know. We want you all to come out. We need to hear from you, the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
We will take a couple of questions, I guess. Well, obviously, narcotics use and firearms are connected. We are seeing that. We're also seeing issues around mental health areas and people intoxicated then using firearms. Then, of course, like you can all imagine, people make bad decisions when they're under the influence or they're dealing with another underlying mental health issue. And that's part of the problem is, of course, we have people that have access to firearms who carry firearms, sometimes for really legitimate reasons, but that are making really bad choices in the moment because of some other issue or because of maybe a flare-up in anger. So, yeah, there's always an excess there.
Chief, how are the resources addressing this wave of homicides? How are you folks doing?
We are doing very well. Our folks are very good at what they do. Obviously, it's always a burden on us, but staffing-wise, we come together. We circle up very well. We don't approach these problems alone. We work in concert with other groups within the city. It isn't like just a uniform is dealing with a murder case. There's all kinds of pieces that come together. And to be honest with you, community leaders do much more than people really realize. In fact, I would suggest to you that I understand why we can get this many cameras and this many interested people in for a topic this serious, but I would suggest that it would be a real win for our city if we had 3 times as many reporters at the summit.
That's right.
3 times the people talking about those issues and celebrating those issues and bringing those into the primary piece of light for what's going on, because I think that light will help us solve these problems.
Question about the federal role, Mr. Lugar. Can you talk about what role your office has?
Well, we were invited here to express the concern and the solidarity of the federal law enforcement with the work that's going on here. We play a supportive role. The partnerships in St. Paul are amazing and effective, and we at the federal level just admire the work of all the people I'm standing with today.
Chief, you had a press conference about a month ago, essentially the same thing, right? I think we had 3 homicides in 4 days at that point, and since then, only a couple of additional homicides. I think people watch this today and they hear people talking about, if you see something, say something. They're hearing about domestic violence, they're hearing about youth crime. It kind of feels like there's so many things being touched on, and they're wondering, has something happened between the last press conference and now to prompt this? What would you say to them?
I would say that in little less than 2 months, since September 15th, 9 people died in our city. And that's 9 too many, on top of the ones that we already had at that point. And I would say, and I did say this very same thing, in fact, I was struck by what Dr. Miller had just said. One of the questions I was asked at that point is, what do you think would help this? And the answer I gave at that time was, we have an entire generation of young people, and they're not just all young folks, that are lacking hope. We need to be brokers in hope. We need to be shining the light on the opportunities that are here. For too long, too many people have told people, it doesn't matter anyway, you don't have a chance, you can't succeed. And I gotta be honest, if I was raised in an environment like that, where I was being told that by society or television or an adult in my life, I might be hopeless and I might act out in ways that I didn't act out in. We have to be better at that. We have to get out and make sure we're shining light on the real issues here. And I will tell you, I said at the end of my prepared words that I was optimistic. I'm out and out inspired listening to the folks that are talking here today.
Would you say, though, are we seeing these crimes being committed by young people? Are they domestic in nature? Are you having issues finding people to fess up or people to, come forward if they know information? I'm just trying to understand the tie-in for everyone that spoke today to put it into context, why we're here.
Yeah. Well, the good news underlying this is for a long time our city suffered under a big youth firearms problem, and that's always going to be some kind of a problem. Thankfully, and big thanks to many of the people up here, that problem has started to be curbed in the right direction. We've seen great reductions there. But these homicides involve domestic assault. They involve robbery issues, and they involve drug deals. They cross the spectrum. And so they don't all fall in neat categories, but they almost all fall into this category. They involve guns, and they involve terrible decisions, and they involve the level of violence we can't accept in our city.
And I'll touch in on that as well. And thank you, Chief. That's really important. We've got national news about our ability to reduce auto thefts in St. Paul in a way that the rest of the country is catching up with. The Chief just talked about our work to reduce violence among young people. That's very important and very critical. You heard from SPIP about our work to reduce domestic violence in our community. The tie that binds all of these things together are guns, people having guns, people making poor decisions, dangerous decisions with guns. But again, what we said in advance is, and again, too many times, we talked to someone who knew that person or knew that person had a gun or saw that person playing with a gun or saw that person doing reckless activities with a gun and look up after the fact and say, I wish I had accessed help a week ago. I wish I had accessed help 2 weeks ago. That's the tie that binds, I think, all of this stuff together and gives us the opportunity to do something, again, in partnership with community as people come forward before that critical incident happens, not wait until after to regret not having come forward.
Chief, why now and why these many guns? Like, how are they getting into the wrong hand? Any indicators there?
I think there's a number of issues that feed that. I mean, there are more guns right now in this country than there are human beings. And that's not an indictment on the Second Amendment or anything like that. We also have a proliferation of ghost guns now where people can manufacture through 3D printers and make guns that are very hard to trace and hard to track. And the other issue is that our young people have the ability now to just go on YouTube and they can learn how to armor a gun, make a gun, clean a gun, do all the things they can do. It's very, very easy. It's a great world we live in when we have all this information, but not everyone uses all that information for the best reasons. And there's just a lot of guns out there. And this isn't if we did this, that would fix that. We have 50, 60 things we have to do. People have to stop leaving their guns in cars. People have to secure their firearms in their homes. People have to make sure they're not giving access to folks with firearms. People need to really consider whether or not they need to be carrying guns in the first place. They need to decide what is the purpose for that and what we as a society, culture, and most importantly, most specifically, what we as a city want to be known for. And it certainly isn't this.
Mr. Trump, you talked about the young man who told you it had been his nightmares that he has about being shot. What did you say to him, or what do you say to someone like that?
I mean, it was a tough conversation, but what we plan to do, and even last night, spend more time with him. This is a young man whose dad just got 15 years about a year ago for having about 10,000 pills of fentanyl. So it's a young man that's broken. I say it again, if I tell you right now, up here, who had a good dad in their life? You see what I'm talking about? If men stand up, little boys will sit down. This young man didn't have a chance. He didn't have a chance from many of these kids come out of their mother's womb not having a chance. And so if men stand up, he doesn't have to, he's not my biological child. I got two guys on my team. She knows both of them. From Brown, I had since he was 13. Anthony Jackson since 16. We're sticking with this kid forever. The grants can go away. Men have to stand up and take their rightful place with these young men and young women. A girl's got to see a positive man. This one right here, she know I know. Art Blakey? Huh? Am I lying?
You're not lying.
So I'm just saying, girls have to, I know his girls. They have to stand up. Men have to stand up. This ain't about money. This ain't about poverty and all that. It's about standing up. You can love your way out of this. You can't hate your way out of it. He hates himself right now. He just spent 18 months in Red Wing. And you know what he told me? He loved it there. They fed him, gave him the kind of social, medical stuff he needed, but now he's back on the street. So we have to love him out of this. We're not going to let him kill himself. We're not going to let him have it. We're not going to let him get killed. That's the plan.
I'll respond to that young person too. St. Paul is not a place to fire a gun, number one. We know that there are folks who get carried because they want to be safe. We can keep people safe. St. Paul is not a place to fire a gun. Our police department, like I said, 90% case clearance rate for homicides. We've doubled the case clearance rates for non-fatal shootings because we have built a posture that we've discussed that any gunfire injury in our city, we respond to as though it were a homicide. We've doubled the case clearance rates. At the same time, St. Paul is not a place to fire a gun. St. Paul is the right place to find opportunity. We ask that young person to reach out to our team, to reach out to our Office of Neighborhood Safety, to come get engaged and find out how many resources we can put in place to both keep that young person safe and put that young person on a pathway to a brighter future, whether that's through one of our youth jobs programs, whether that's through our youth programming within our Parks and Rec or nonprofit partners. We have an enormous set of resources to put in place to help that young person if he gives us a chance to. Thank you all.
We don't have a date yet. No. Yep, your church.
1115 Greenbrier. Arlington Hills Lutheran Church. It's going to be the first or second weekend in December. We just haven't confirmed the date yet, but it'll be first, second weekend in December.